So typically I don't get too philosophical on this channel. Usually I keep it about the X's and O's because I'm a huge nerd. But for this video we're going to be looking at two guys and the perception of them and how it's changed over the past couple of seasons. First one's James Harden, second one is Steph Curry. You're not surprised because it's the title of the video. And I think if we just look at the highs and the lows that these two guys have had over the past 1 to 3 seasons, I would say, it's been pretty up and down. And I think moving into the playoffs of this year, I think the perception around these two, as well as the legacy stuff, I think all that can come into play just with their performances in the postseason. Let's start with Steph Curry. Last season he had one of the best offensive years you're ever going to see. 50, 40, 90, averaging 30 points a game and shooting well above 40% from 3 while also taking about 11 a game. It was simply ridiculous, the amount of just crazy shots and big moments that Curry had last season for the Warriors. And that was just in the regular season for a team that would go on to win 73 games. And then if you fast forwarded to the playoffs, he continued that as well. I mean, you may remember the game he had against the Trailblazers where he had 17 points in overtime or something ridiculous where the guy was just on another level. The impact he made with his three-point shooting and whether it be scoring off ball or moving off ball in Golden State's offense, as well as just showing up in the big games, it was, I mean, like I said, that season for him was just crazy. And then you go on to the Western Conference Finals where they went up against the Oklahoma City Thunder. OKC pushed him to the brink, putting him down 3-1, and Game 6 as well as Game 7, Curry just went off, putting up over 30 points in both of those games. I mean, in Game 7 against the Thunder, he went 7 for 12 from 3. And the crazy thing is, just given how good he was all season up to that point, none of us were really surprised to see a performance like that from him in a huge Game 7. But then it kind of flipped itself. The Warriors, of course, built a 3-1 lead over the Cavaliers, but Curry in those last couple of games against the Cavs, including the very last shot, just wasn't very good. And I think it's really hurt the perception of him as a guy who's not always willing to attack inside, a guy who maybe shrinks in the biggest moment. And I mean, Kyrie Irving played out of his mind those last couple of games, including what could have been the biggest shot of the series over Curry with a minute left in Game 7. I mean, go on Twitter for 5 seconds and you can just find the negative responses about anything related to Curry. And while, yeah, I do think people are overlooking some of the things he did leading up to the finals, you can't deny that he just was disappointing in the big moments of that series. And then you fast forward to this season, and while Curry has still been very good, he's fallen back down to earth. Last time I checked, he was actually under 40% from 3, and I mean, he's not even in the MVP conversation when he was the unanimous one a season ago. I mean, you can tell that he's declined a little bit. And I think for the people who just think negatively of Curry, I just think it's more ammo that they can use against him. And it would only be amplified if he wasn't able to really come through in the postseason this year. The electric Steph Curry from a season ago is just simply not there right now. And let's say he meets the San Antonio Spurs in the Western Conference Finals. I mean, this is a very smart team who knows what they're doing on both sides of the floor. They have the best coach in the league in Greg Popovich, as well as the star power of Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge. So, I mean, it's not like it'd be an easy time if Curry and the Warriors made it to the West Finals, which we assume they're going to do. And I'm just saying, Steph, you better show up, man. You better be ready for whatever defense that the Spurs want to throw at the Warriors, whether it be putting Kawhi Leonard on him one-on-one or switching whenever he gets a screen from Durant or Draymond or whoever. you got to be ready, because if he's struggling once again, I think at that point you're going to have 2 straight postseasons of people being like, what's going on, Curry? You know, are you really as good as people claim that you are? I mean, LeBron James has outdone him in perhaps 2 NBA finals up to this point, is what a lot of people would say. So even if the Warriors manage to get to the finals, then people are once again going to be asking if you can show up against them. I mean, it's the star player treatment. We saw how high that Curry ascended in the regular season and winning 73 games, and I mean, Golden State isn't exactly a quiet team when it comes to the way that they celebrate victories and all that. People are going to take notice, and that means that if you're having a down series and a big moment, they're going to kill you for it. Now we can talk about James Harden, because I think he's in a similar situation to Curry, honestly, with how his performance this playoffs could go. Remember their crazy comeback against the Clippers? You could have seen James Harden on the bench, sulking, looking like he didn't really want to be there, as a whole group of almost role players for the Rockets managed to come back from a ridiculous deficit against the Clippers. It was like a 14 or 15 point swing in the fourth quarter, right when they were pushing up against elimination. I mean, Harden, he wasn't on the floor for any of that. He was not the driving force behind it. Now, of course, he would go on and lead them to a victory over the Clippers in Game 7, but I think what really hurts James Harden's case and what he's been building back this year is from last season, really, where the Rockets were just disappointing. After being in the Western Conference Finals, they barely got in there at 41 wins, and while James Harden's individual numbers were still pretty good, at least from a production standpoint, not really from an efficiency standpoint, the chemistry, defense, and overall effort level of those Houston Rockets were just pretty weak. And if you remember, James Harden was not receiving many nice words when this year was going on. His aloofness, as well as his inability to really get the chemistry down with a guy like Dwight Howard, who, I mean, you could make the argument that Howard's just being a little ridiculous asking for post-ups, but it was just a negative cloud over this Rockets team the entire year. And James Harden, I mean, his defense wasn't helping as well. So I think, for as good of a player as he is, James Harden was at his lowest point last season. The perception of the guy was just, yeah, he's very talented, but he's not really going to go all out to win. He's rewritten the book this season. He's been fantastic. He's an MVP candidate. Very well could win it. He's been perhaps the best playmaker in the NBA this season. But we have a question, because I don't think you can rewrite the whole thing in just one regular season, and I'm going to use the San Antonio Spurs as an example once again, because it's a safe bet that either the Rockets or the Warriors will be seeing these guys, or probably both of them, really. Are you going to be ready for Kawhi Leonard to defend you, Harden? Are you going to be ready to play defense against San Antonio's offense, where they move the ball around, they set screens, the ball's always zipping around? It's going to be a question. And I don't think losing to the Spurs is going to, like, crucify any one of these guys, but it's more like, how is your individual performance going to be? I mean, if Harden plays as well as he possibly can, and the Spurs still manage to beat him in like 7 games, well, that's one thing. But if it's like a 5 or 6 game series and you're just disappointing, and Kawhi has a couple of games where he locks you up, which is very difficult to do, I think it's that sort of thing where people can be like, well, he was great for the season, and then once it really started to count, we saw that quote-unquote old James Harden come back. And I'm not saying I necessarily feel this way, but I mean, it's the perception around the league. Like, if you've ever been on Twitter or in a comment section, like, you'll see this stuff. So I think it's just something that James Harden and Curry are going to have to deal with, and I think they could kind of break out of that if they just kill it in these playoffs. Again, I don't think you have to win the whole damn thing, but just be who we think you're going to be. You know, with Harden, be the great playmaker, be the masterful pick-and-roll wizard that you are. Curry, hit a couple of crazy three-pointers and go on a deep playoff run. and you'll be okay. But, I mean, look, Curry, people are still giving him crap for the 3-1 series loss, as well as not showing up in the big games in the finals. James Harden had that really ugly 41-win season. It'll just be interesting to see how these guys perform once the playoffs are here.